All right, welcome to Social Selling Hour. Here on July 14th. Brian Fanzo with Zachary Jeans here on the Google Hangout. We have Rachel Miller running live from the Twitter chat. So we're going to kind of do a Twitter chat Google Plus Hangout combo with Zach today. So welcome to the Social Selling Hour, Zachary.
Hey, thanks, Brian.
So what we're kind of talking today is we're talking about building your network. Kind of the essential element of social is, really, those conversations, getting things started. But before we jump into any of the questions, go ahead and give us a little background about you and kind of tell us how and what you do for a living. And I know most people on here will know you from social, that's for sure. So just give
Yeah.
us a little background.
Well, I guess I'll start there. Social. So a lot of people do know me from social. About 2011, I realized that the power to learn and connect wasn't happening anymore face to face primarily, but it was starting to happen really leveraging Twitter. And I discovered a community around Salesforce.com, folks who really enjoyed just talking about the product and how to learn about the product, and that was my first inception into social and the power to network, just more than say messaging friends on Facebook. Since then, I've really focused on the relationship side of things, and um, so connecting through chats, connecting through Google Plus Hangouts like we're doing today, that's really the heart of where I focus my energy. In fact, when I go to a conference, we'll be standing there, chatting about whatever it is that the tech company does. I do some analyst type stuff on the side here too, and they'll offer me a business card, and I'll stop them and I'll say, do you have a Twitter handle? Can we connect on LinkedIn? No? Okay, well, gosh, yeah, no thanks. And I literally, because honestly, if we don't connect on Twitter and we don't connect on LinkedIn, the likelihood of us connecting beyond that conference is, I have found it's almost zero. You know?
Yeah,
So,
that's the truth. I mean, that's the funny part about, I always say business cards are great because that's where you leave them on your nightstand in your hotel when you leave, right? That's
right.
I've been to a couple of events where people just take pictures of their badges instead of a business card because
Yep.
it makes more sense that way. And I think that's kind of where you came. Now, I know you also do I'm a big fan of Lead with Giants and what you and Dan Forbes do. So, give you a little background on that side as well.
Sure, sure. So one of the communities I'm really involved with and have been for a couple of years now is Lead with Giants, and they are a servant leadership group. They really focus on helping businesses do their change management in terms of leadership, how you lead, and creating teams that function well with leaders that understand how to lift others up, how to get that collaboration happening. So the Lead with Giants community happens on Google Plus, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and of course Twitter. We have a chat every day, every Monday. In fact, we have one today, 7 p.m. Eastern. And so Dan asked myself and Cynthia Bays and her handles at the Smart Chick to co-host with him. So we just started doing that. Love it. It's a great community. You should come. I know you hang out there.
I do. I'm
Yeah.
a big fan.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. That's one of the ones that I saw the growth and the kind of the potential of Twitter chats. I remember it was T-Chat community,
Yep.
Lee with Giants, and a couple other ones. The CXO talk. I know both of us are both big fans of that one as well. And it's kind of this
Mhm.
the growth of community, and that kind of leads us perfectly into kind of our first question for what this chat is, because we're kind of talking about. I always joke because I never worried about growing followers, but I always worried about growing, friends and conversations. So I think
Mhm.
that's like the perfect, topic for this because you and I have become friends and connect and engage on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Google
Mhm.
Plus, and it's all through, kind of a network and Twitter chat. So we jump into that first question. Many people struggle with finding the right people to engage with online. So where do you kind of recommend they start? How do you kind of start when it went to kind of understanding and engaging online, building your network?
That's great. Great question, Brian. So the first place I tell folks to follow is once they find a couple friends that they know from their professional life that are active on a social network. Um, you're going to find that you have folks in your office that are actually on Twitter or they're actually engaging on Google+. It may only be a couple, but what you need to do is as you open up your ears around conversations in the office, you're going to hear, oh, I tweeted this, I tweeted that, or did you see this? And yeah, you look and there's a Google+ page in front of you. Follow those people. So start with your natural, organic relationships in the office. Or perhaps you run across somebody at a conference and they offer, hey, can I follow you on Twitter? Those personal, real-world engagements are where you start. And then what I do is if it's somebody that I'm interested in at that organic level, I open up their Twitter profile and I look at their following list and I scroll all the way back and scroll all the way back to that first 100 followers or so that they're following. And those people, to me, are the people that mattered most to them when they got online. They're the people that they're bringing in from their personal organic network, and those are the folks that I want to follow. And what I find is if you do that with a handful of folks in a specific industry, say maybe you're interested in CRM, if you discover in their profile, shoot, these people at the beginning of their social life are all talking about this particular CRM or this particular design company or whatever it is. Maybe it's IBM, a big giant company like that. You can discover where those natural organic networks are.
I love that. I love the tip of going and kind of looking at the initial people that they follow. And I laugh because I've had multiple Twitter accounts. I kind of talked at one point I had 8 Twitter accounts because I'm not bipolar, but I have lots of interests. And so I would go create different accounts. And eventually I've kind of whittled those down to having 3 different accounts today. But it's really telling to not only see who people are engaging with, or who they joined the social network to become friends with or kind of talk with. But I always talk about the important part of social is if you find what someone else is passionate about, and then evoking that passion, right? And the best way to do that, I even like to run like little searches or trends and say what's the most common hashtag someone has used on their Twitter account, because that's so telling. And I love the tip of looking back and kind of looking at to see where and what people kind of came to social for.
Right. So you can see things in a person's bio, and like you're saying, you can see a hashtag. Sometimes people post a hashtag or a keyword right in their bio. That's helpful. I think that the particular tip of like scrolling back into their following, especially if they've got a couple thousand followers, it takes a little bit of effort on Twitter to scroll back, right? But you're doing something that 99% of your competitors or other folks aren't doing when you do that. And so it's actually an advantage. Another one that I do for finding folks is around conferences. So a lot of conferences will live stream their event. If there are people that are tweeting along that hashtag, those people, one, are savvy enough to be online. They are interested in very, very specific content, right? If they're taking time out of their workday to live stream a conference and tweet about it, they're going to be highly engaging when you step outside of that window of the conference. And so what I will do is I'll follow a conference hashtag and watch it live stream, and then I will follow those individuals as their tweets are popping up and engage with them during that conference. And then make sure the next couple days after the conference I follow up and say something like, hey, I really appreciate what you said about X at the conference. That was awesome.
That's a great one. I use that's very similar. I not only how many people here love, when you're on social, you love going to events. I'm one that I love presenting, I love attending, but we also don't have a budget. We all can't attend. And so many times, not only do I meet great people, but I learn and extend conversations just by following a hashtag. And I think I even messaged out to Ray Wang this morning. He was at I think at an HR conference. And he was posting pictures and sharing message. And I said, keep it coming. I feel like I'm sitting right next to you. And that that relationship is really important. I think you highlighted the event one is a big one. The idea that people don't know what to search for or they don't know what to tweet, and I always laugh because it's like, I guarantee there's something you're passionate about. Put that in the search field and let just see what happens. And a lot of times just having I use the hashtag social biz, SOCBIZ, and I'm amazed how many conversations, events, things that I had no idea about, and no Google search. So I would probably go on page 48 of a Google search to find that out. But like
Correct.
that's the cool thing. I mean, I think that's a really big part, and I see lots of good stuff coming on Twitter. I think Jim Canto talking, find a way to say thank you, sincerely
Yep.
as soon as the opportunity is appropriate. I love that because I think a lot of it is not only thank you, but promoting and sharing those that you really are engaged with, and that's important. And I'm glad to see things like Twitter chats and like the conversation we're having today kind of taking steam, because I think these are the conversations that help get more people involved in social. And back to your original comment, listening around the lunchroom, I can't tell you how many times that I would hear people say, like, hey, I posted this on LinkedIn, and I was amazed that I wasn't connected with them, and it's probably because they didn't have the right company listed in their profile. But
Right.
if you open
Yeah.
your ears to hearing those conversations, those are definitely great tips for sure. And kind of jumping into kind of question two, what tools do you use to locate new contacts, or maybe find new people to follow,
Sure.
after you've kind of found the first kind of steps?
Sure. Yeah. The whole scrolling back and mining, important folks is people that you've connected organically with that are social and finding out their core. That of course, first step that I do. The second step is tools. So I'm a huge fan of Buffer app for posting at different hours and things. And then what it does is it pulls back good analytics across all of the major social channels. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google Plus. And what it will do is it'll highlight tweets that got retweeted for you in a concise way and showing where their particular reach is. So you're going to discover just very inexpensively, Buffer's not an expensive app to add to your social profile, but you're going to discover folks that are spreading content. They're going to highlight to you. Another one I like to use specifically for Twitter is Social Bro. They're at Social Bro. And they're a UK company, and they only do two things. They do Twitter, and they've just invested in doing Instagram. So a lot of social analytics don't really get into Instagram, but Social Bro just started. And with Social Bro, they have perhaps the best Twitter search that there is. They also have the ability to follow and unfollow a large amount of folks at the same, one sit down. And you can search by hashtag, you can search by key phrase, you can get into the size of their followers. Maybe you don't want to follow a bunch of folks that have a bunch of followers and are following a bunch of people. Like, you don't want to follow the 200,000 follower folks because they don't really engage much. But you want to really nail down to that 5,000 follower group where they've got 5,000 people, 10,000 people, and they follow back about that. You know that they're super engaged, they're super active. Social Bro can give you insight into those sorts of folks. Yeah, so those are two of my favorites, Buffer app
Yeah,
and Social Bro.
I'm a big fan of Buffer, and I've used Social Bro here and there. I think I'm gonna have to recheck it out for sure. And I think part of that kind of what you were explaining is really understanding. There's a few people that have the ton of followers and the the massive groups that do a great job of engaging. I know we're both big fans of Return on Relationship with Ted Rubin,
Sure.
and
Good
I think
example of somebody who's huge but still engages.
which is I think
Yeah.
the future. I think that's where leaders like Ted that really we have too many leaders that got a great following, have lots of books, but they say they're too busy now to engage. And I think that's you're almost contradicting with everything you preach in your book if you're too busy to engage your followers. And Barb brought up one here on Twitter, and I love this one. Congratulate them or wish them a happy birthday. Um,
Sure.
I preach and I teach. Part of the element that I teach is cross collaboration. Like, if someone's really good at engaging and using LinkedIn, I'm promised they're probably on Twitter, but you get a notification on Facebook or LinkedIn that says it's someone's birthday. Take the time to kind of message them individually, or share a graphic on Twitter, because not only does it show you care, but it's taking that extra step where it's not just anybody can hit retweet for a lot of things. And I think that's why tools like Social Bro and Buffer's analytics definitely do provide lots of great value. And when it comes to selling, when you think about social selling and we
Sure.
think about contacts, the Rolodex is a lot of times what the black book is what people really value. And do you use any tools to actually manage the contacts, kind of like all of your
Oh,
digital
I see what
contacts?
you're saying. Yeah. So right now, I primarily just use TweetDeck and Social Bro and Buffer App, and I have experimented with some of the social CRMs. I'm definitely a fan of Nimble. I like the way Nimble. They're at Nimble here on Twitter, and it's a company John Ferrara started. Uh, because it takes all of your conversations from all your social networks and then puts them in a chronological timeline. So when you click on a contact, you see all of their information, how every place you've had a conversation with them right in front of you. I think that as they improve from a CRM standpoint, because I'm a huge fan of enterprise CRM solutions, like say a Salesforce, you get with Salesforce, you're going to get workflow and things that bigger companies need, like when are we going to respond? You need these updates and who can see what. And Nimble's working on that. But as far as the social side, Nimble's really nailed it.
So yeah, and I know you're a big fan of Salesforce, and I guess kind of when we kind of finish off this tool conversation. But when it comes to Salesforce, I think big enterprise. I think great management of huge, large social teams of not only CRM contact, but the sales workflow, the pipeline, and then you have tools like Nimble and Pipeliner that do a great job of kind of bringing in digital data. Where do you see kind of Salesforce and Nimble? When it comes to those tools, like what do you really like about Salesforce that you can kind of see being important elements of Nimble and Pipeliner?
So when you go to a company that's say 30 people or larger, or an organization, you start to get a lot of data and a lot of individuals trying to sort of work together on group sales and different regions and so forth, and it's not word of mouth in the office anymore. And so when you're at that word of mouth in the office, or even just through a tool like say HipChat, right, where you're communicating with one another, kind of behind the scenes, you can still get away with not employing say an enterprise CRM solution. It's when you get to some stuff that simply needs to be automated, that certain sales staff just don't get to see certain deals, right? There's not that transparency, and there's management has a good reason why they don't want Joe to see Alex's deal or Sarah seeing Sam's deal. They have reasons, and so with an enterprise CRM like Salesforce, you have a layer of security and a layer of visibility within the organization. But as it relates to social, so I work with a couple companies on their social strategy. And they do Salesforce productivity apps, and one works with nonprofits, and they have a solution that works specifically with nonprofit organizations overlaid on top of or built on Salesforce. And in either case, no matter what solution you are or what industry or vertical you're in, taking that social engagement and funneling it back into your CRM is basically where I see the world now. And if folks don't see it now, that's where it's going. So like, you see what I mean? So it's not going to be just an email list where you're dropping, like a 0.05% return rate on your email. It's going to be like, oh, we got a 5% response rate on our Instagram picture, and now that's in our CRM data, and folks can actually see it in a large company.
No, I think that's the important part there. I think there's so much of it has to be about instead of focusing it. I posted on Twitter about it being a Rolodex, but really it's about the people, right? And it's that it's funny because when you can attach the social message, the relationship you have to your CRM data. So when you have all these, the whole point of that is building good data and not getting overwhelmed with the data. I know I saw a couple tweets coming through. Dave Stein joined us, being careful with getting pounded with data, and I agree. And Ramon Delon, he said, let people get to know the face behind the logo, and I think that's that's spot on, because the difference between social selling and some of the cold calling or some of the things that we've we've focused on in the past, so much of that is just the either blitzing them with data or blitzing them with information, and now you get the whole story in CRM, and I think that's kind of an important factor moving forward. I laugh at the word Rolodex, or even your group of business cards. I think Joel Comm posted on Facebook recently. He had a mountain of business cards, and he's like, hopefully everyone in here is engaged with me because I'm throwing these away, and really
Right.
that's the old way of doing it, compared to kind of where the amount of data, contacts, relationships we can build now.
I tell you
So
what, I mean, what if somebody paid like uh, somebody ought to make an app for maid services that work at these hotels, right? To go through and grab all the business cards and throw them into one of those quick scans that do the OCR. Oh my goodness! I mean,
yeah, I
what
can
if you
imagine
could?
how many.
Yeah, can you imagine all the contact information that gets thrown away after a conference at the Marriott or at a Hilton or something? Oh my goodness!
Yep, I agree. That's funny. So I'll jump into question 3 here. We
Yeah.
have like kind of the, what is so special about the people you're following? What insights can you provide? I think this is a good question. 'Cause I think old school social and old school Twitter had a lot to do with, you didn't want to follow a ton of people. And I always feel bad because I tweet a lot during the day, and if someone
Yeah.
doesn't follow a lot of people, they're stuck with my, ugly mug sitting there on their
Right.
news feed all day. But
I've
I think,
definitely lost followers because of that. If
and
they
I,
follow 200 people, I am a nuisance to their Twitter feed, and it breaks my heart because I'm friends with them on Facebook. I'm, where I don't post as much, or I'm friends with them in person, and I feel bad because I, dumped on their stream. But at the same time, as the networks evolved, as Twitter became a lot higher frequency, more of a living WhatsApp app or a living SMS app, uh, you know, it's just you have to adjust if you're going to be on the platform. And I think those people maybe a year ago that only followed 200 and they got annoyed by it, they're coming back around. They realize Twitter isn't going away, and I just got to adjust to it.
Yep. No, I think I think that, that's where we're kind of going with this question is, what insights can you provide? I'm a list junkie. I love Twitter lists because
Right,
I think it helps
right.
kind of divide your Twitter feed. But, how do you, what kind of value do you put on someone versus adding them to a list and not following them, or do you follow, like, kind of what's your kind of philosophy on, following someone or kind of getting to know someone as far as, Twitter following? When it comes to social selling, people want to know that either you're listening or you're caring. How do you kind of
Right.
balance that?
Right. So, man, this is a tough question. Uh, you want people to feel validated if they follow you. And so I will follow back about 60, 70, probably 70% of the time. You have to have some relationship to my very broad interests. I mean, my interests span from analyst stuff all the way down to if you're tweeting about Legos, okay? I mean, I have a really broad view, so I will follow you back. But gosh, if you're like, some hotel chain from some part of the world I've never tweeted about, and you're just following and unfollowing folks to gain followers because somebody's trying to build that brand, I'm probably not going to follow you back. Especially if I don't see any engagement on your profile. Um, as far as lists go, I am a fan of lists. I love lists, but I used to do a lot of lists, and now I'm down to about 3.
Hmm.
I follow 3 that are my very specific interests, right? That's personal me. If I'm representing a brand, if I'm ghost strategizing for a brand, I do create lists, but they're usually private. At that point, I don't want to give my competitors an advantage over my insights, right, for that company. So I will keep them private, but they're up in TweetDeck, and I'm utilizing that information on a daily basis.
No, that's great. I think that's the advantage of using private and public lists. I don't know if everyone knows that. And
Yeah.
when it comes,
Oh gosh.
you hit a really big. I mean, a social selling. When you come to social selling, so many conversations are about, I don't want to give away all this information. I don't want everything to be public. And there's so much you can do on social with data or even
Hmm.
engagements and relationships that isn't public. I argue
Right.
that as much as I post in public, I do just as much on Google Talk. I do just as much on Facebook chat. I'm working on a business deal that probably started and will finish on Facebook chat. And
There you
you know,
go.
that's kind of the power of that. I think that kind of what I'm seeing through the Twitter chat, a lot of people are kind of feeling the same way. And I had a great question. It was at Social Media Marketing World, and Chris Brogan was given the keynote, and they asked him, how do you handle people following and unfollowing you and dealing with that? And he's a believer in the hey, I only care if if they want to follow me, but if they all of a sudden decide that they don't want to follow me anymore, it's their loss. And for
Right.
me, that was a struggle for a while, because I really if I lost someone, I'd say for the first couple of years on Twitter, if someone
Oh,
unfollowed me,
sure.
you would go back and be like, oh, what did I do? What message? But so much of Twitter now is standing out from the noise, creating the relationships, and I often look at who unfollows me to see if I'm doing a bad job engaging, and I think that's
Sure.
important. Kind of even with the private lists, I'll create a list a lot of times of people that I not only want to engage in from a sales perspective, but also
Hmm.
someone that I want to make sure that they know that I'm still listening and caring. And I think that's kind of
Yeah.
important. And I think there's a couple of people on Twitter that Vincent had said people who can either tell you all or nothing. You have to evaluate by cross-referencing with other channels, and I think that's important as well. Like I know a lot of people that are really great engagers on Facebook, but they are
Uh-huh.
link dropping spammers on Twitter. So it's you kind of have to
Yeah.
balance those
Oh,
two for sure.
yeah.
And lists. I've always been a fan of lists. I use TweetDeck as well. I leave my lists up across the board. I have a list just about for every topic and channel that you go. So, going into question 4, once someone has kind of been identified as a person that you want to engage with, what's kind of your first move? What's your, and this is someone that either you're following or, you've decided to follow them, and you've
Right.
got you've got the either unfortunate auto DM, which I think we do need to write a book about the spamming of auto messaging. People use automation and forget to be human, but
Sure.
what's your kind of first move when it comes to engaging with people for especially from a social selling perspective, because it
Right.
starts as a relationship and it leads to everywhere else.
Yeah, so don't ask for the sale the first tweet, or don't ruin that relationship with the first, hey, check out my book, or get my free ebook, or I don't care whether it's an auto DM or you typed it out by hand. I mean, if the first thing you're doing is saying, uh, come see my stuff, I mean, it comes off, to me anyway, it just comes off as rude, and you aren't listening, you're just talking. Um, the other thing I would say about initiating a good relationship is I look for opportunities where if I've got a new follower and they're not just somebody that's kind of filtered into my life because they found me in some random way, but there's somebody that I have an organic reach to at some point, somebody I'm going to connect with at a conference, or somebody I'm going to connect around say a product or an industry. If there's somebody that I'm going to build a relationship with the ultimate intention of hopefully having a sale or financial relationship with, I want that to be the third thing on the list, because ultimately the strength of our relationship has to be built on a good foundation, and I think that's trust, and as mushy as it sounds, love. And it's just not loving to spam people or to talk at people, but it is loving and caring to listen to people and to help people. So a basic way I do that is if somebody follows me, hey, thank you for following me, comma, and then type out their name, not just their Twitter handle, but their actual name. That says, I see you. And then go and look in their stream to see if they've talked about something within the last day or so, not too far back, about something that I have some interest in. And if they've talked with somebody else, I might mention both of them and just say, that's so true, I saw this, and give them a link or a picture or an infographic to something I've seen. Add to their conversation, and don't dominate it, but just add to it. And very often what that does is it inserts you into a network of folks that they're already engaging in. It shows your personal value to them. And then down the line, what you have there is an opportunity to DM them or say, hey, can I DM you? I would love to actually talk with you on the old-fashioned telephone. And so many people are like, great, I would love to do that.
No, I think that's important. And I like I just tweeted it out that don't dominate the conversation, add to it. That's an important element for sure. And I think when it comes down to I like the auto DMs are frustrating, but also ones that are not automated and typed out just like an automated DM where
Yeah.
they're not personalized, they're not customized, and even I think I have I always say that my social change with jab 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 right hook from
Yeah,
Gary's
perfect.
perspective, and the idea of give give give, it can't be lost in the social relationship, much like you were saying. When you're adding to someone's conversation and providing value, you're giving instead of being the, hey, I don't even like someone that messaged me and says, hey, like me on Facebook as well.
Oh, it's
It's like,
just,
well,
it's garbage.
what reason do I have? Give me a reason to like you. Like, hey, Brian, I
Right.
see that you like social selling. My Facebook account is about social selling. I promise. I hit the link, I hit like. But if you tell me the same person says, Brian, hey, click my Facebook link, I don't click it, nor do I hit like. And I think that's kind of, a giant separation because
If we're
although
getting, yeah, if we're getting onto pet peeves, I mean, if that's where we're taking this, I
it could
mean,
be.
well, that could be a whole hour in itself, right? What are your pet peeves about social? But
Yep.
auto DMs, especially a DM, if I followed somebody and they haven't followed me back, oh my goodness, if I can't respond to you on an auto DM that you sent me and you're like, hey, follow me, or hey, Zach, what do you think about X? And I try and respond to your DM, and all I get is cannot connect to user because they don't
Yep.
follow you. I mean, some people I can tell they're novices, they're just starting out on Twitter. But if they're a pro, I mean, they've got 11,000 followers and they're doing this for, a living, or they're working as a, marketing VP somewhere and they've got a big social following, and I know they are just crunching this out. Oh my goodness! It almost basically I go, okay, I'm not going to follow you. I mean, and not only that, I'm not going to direct any traffic towards you. You've
Correct.
almost, and it happened. Why? Because you were lazy, or you just felt like you were the most important thing in the world.
It's funny because people that are really good at sales offline, they take the time to, they know the bottle of scotch that someone likes, right? So
Sure.
they know what their kids are like. But yet on that same person, if they want to blame social, they just all of a sudden get on there and, auto message, and they don't put the same effort, the same care. And I think it's important to, if you invest that time to learn their favorite bottle of scotch, they didn't
Right.
tell you that. You didn't ask them that on your first date. Like you're
Right.
building that relationship. And I think Cindy Jensen said on Twitter, tell them who you are as opposed to what you do. Much more meaningful, seeking to find mutual interests. And I mean,
Exactly.
that's the key right there. I preach show you care. People, I think there was a great article by Marcia Collier that was talking about, how do you promote on social, promote yourself. And promoting yourself doesn't come off as promoting if you're doing the how and the why and the who you are instead of the
Yes.
what, and I think that's um, the
I want to chime in on that, Brian.
yeah.
So I have represented a number of brands, and I had one brand that was a global food additive company, and they did natural food coloring, okay? But they had a social presence on multiple channels, and they needed somebody to come in and help them do that for about 4 months while they got somebody in-house that they could trust. But they were very much a PR broadcast mode. Okay, so they didn't want to do engagement in a community. They didn't want to do a lot of tweeting with folks individually, but they still wanted to have a social presence and value. Now, of course, you and I and gosh, everybody on this chat right now, I think is on board with the idea that we don't want to spam people. So how do you do that? That was the question posed to me by this brand. How do we provide value and yet be a broadcast-focused channel? And what I found is that you can offer an awful lot of value and still promote yourself. If you're doing something about food color, gosh, who doesn't want to see awesome foodie pics, but also interrelate that back to the concept that, hey, there's a reason why your steak looks brown when you put barbecue sauce on it, and that mattered to this food company. So you can tell your story. You can be broadcast focused. If the brand's not ready to build a community per se, they can do it by providing value in the way they share about their content. And here's the other thing. Here's the value, and it kind of goes to what Gary Vaynerchuk wrote in that Jab, Jab, Jab book, because there's got to be a hook. And I have found I was nervous about asking for putting out that right hook to the jaw and asking for this sale, self-promoting that content. But you know what? People don't know what you do unless you tell them. They
That's
aren't
important.
gonna. I mean, with the stream and the content that's flying by us every day in our lives, if you never say, "Hey, this is what we do," guess what? You actually aren't providing value to your potential clients and customers because they have no idea who you are. They see
Yep.
neat stuff. They see, oh, that was a cool infographic. But if you never say, hey, give us a call at this number, we can talk to you about X. Well, okay, now I have something to hang my hat on. I can pick up the phone, or I can hit that number on a Twitter feed, and it'll dial on my iPhone. But yeah, you got to do that.
That's the important part, and I think it depends really on your goal and your hook. I kind of teach when I'm coaching kind of executives, I do the 60-30-10. 60% active tweeting, just engaging,
Sure.
30% promoting others, 10% kind of promoting and sharing your sell, your hook. And a lot of times it doesn't. I love the idea of sharing pictures. Like, one of the Marriott hotels does a great job of. They don't tell you about this brand new fire pit they have in the backyard. They just give you 12 pictures from all different angles of these people enjoying the fire pit.
Yes.
And you immediately say, "Wow, they have a great fire pit." And I think that's part of the conversation. And one of the things that is a stickler for me, and Allison Stone brought it up on Twitter, is sometimes the limitations of Twitter followers. So the 2,000 limit was beyond frustrating for me. I can remember, and I wasn't too long ago. I was at the 2,000 limit on the iSocial account.
Sure.
Back in August of last year, and you can't follow over 2,000, so you're unfollowing, unfollowing, and that is a frustrating thing. And I always kind of look at it as that's when you really start honing in on your lists, and you really need to be pretty diligent in unfollowing the people that aren't inactive. I have a couple if this then that apps that will run and say if someone stops tweeting for 30 days, I'm going to unfollow them because there's something to be said on that. So I hear Allison on that. I think maybe that's a good topic, is really some social faux pas or social tips that we have on a future chat that we can teach people if you're going to do social selling, rather than, and you don't even have to follow a ton of people, use hashtags to get in other people's conversations and things like that. I think that's I think this one's blow a new follower's mind. Send them a thanks with a video selfie or a direct Instagram to them. I know VSnap is a great one.
Sure.
You can send an individual video saying thank you. How much cooler is that?
So if you've got even a small budget in your personal life, it depends. Okay, so if we're talking about brands, a brand handle versus say you're an individual sales person and you are using your individual account to sell on behalf of you're doing personal stuff, but you're also incorporating your job into your daily life on your on social selling. If you've got any kind of personal budget from your company for buying drinks, for buying food, right? Tweet a coffee. Tweet a coffee. Hey, is everybody familiar with that? You got it at Tweet a Coffee. It's by Starbucks. You can send a $5 gift card via Twitter to them publicly. And
I believe you're the first one I ever saw that to, and you sent it to me for my birthday. So I think that
find somebody's birthday and just say if you know them. I mean, I wouldn't do this cold. It's somebody that you probably tweeted with a few times, but gosh, if you have and you like them and they respond well to you, it's their birthday, you get all these notifications, tweet them a coffee.
I love that idea.
It's $5.
That goes like right, and with the next question being, when is it okay to send a contact a direct message? I think it goes into, when do you take the conversation, beyond just, you're establishing a relationship to where the relationship now is okay. Now we can kind of take action. Do you have any rules or best practices from that angle?
Sure. And this is, the empathy part is, some people don't feel others. They don't get the vibe. They're just looking at it and they see information. They don't feel anything from what people are saying. So some people have the gift of being empathetic. When they read a sentence, they get something emotionally from that. So they can tell if the person's open or not open. But if we're just talking about rules of thumb, I would say this. If there's somebody that you have an organic connection to, i.e. they participate in your industry, you haven't met personally, but they're rolling in the same circles as you, and you've connected on Twitter, and you've tweeted with them once or twice, at that point, it's really not out of bounds to just say, hey, I'm curious. Could you tell me more about what you're doing? We're in the same industry. And then go ahead and send that publicly, and then maybe, Kate, can I DM you? And just ask that little baby permission. It shows them respect. It shows them that you care about their time, their day, It does all kinds of wonderful things, and maybe they were busy, but now that you've been nice, they'll stop what they're doing and they'll actually talk to you.
I
So,
love that. No, I mean, I think because I always, much with, the click my link, you don't text message someone that you've created a relationship with and say, can I text you? Or, the idea is like, hey, you have this value. So like, bring me the value and say, hey, can we take this offline? And I've had a couple of really good guys from the Sales for Life team. They'll message me and say, hey, Brian, I loved your insight on this. Can I send you a DM about setting up an offline conversation? To me,
perfect.
I'm all over that. Genius.
Perfect.
Yep, and I think that's really the element that is, and I think the Twitter feed's jumping on the tweet of coffee, and I can say, I was a recipient from Zach on a tweet of coffee on my birthday, and I remember thinking to myself, like, not only did I know he cared enough to know it was my birthday, but you take it a step further. So I think that's a valuable tip. If when they leave from here, or even like the Facebook one, I know I've used like the send flowers to friends that one of my friends lost his dad, and it was as easy as sending flowers through Facebook, but they got a Facebook notification about it, and he knew that it was I was taking just a little bit more than just saying sorry for your loss, because just like hitting retweet and just like saying thank you when someone retweets, a lot of times if you go thank you, I really appreciate your insight. What were your thoughts on that comment? Or let's have a DM conversation about the next thing. I think taking the conversation beyond just it's that what do they say when you don't want to give a yes no answer. You don't want to say a thank you that doesn't kind of establish a conversation. And I think that you hit it home with the direct message for sure. So when it comes to sharing content with someone you don't know, like how do you recommend sharing content and getting it in front of I in the ebook that just came out about social selling, I said the hardest thing to do is to attract attention. And I think it was Seth Godin's keynote at Icon was he was very very he had a upside down hanging bat. And he said, going into a conversation, he stopped. He goes, I think I got every single person that was tweeting to look up at the screen because they couldn't figure out why I was going to talk about this bat. And he was like, I got your attention. He goes, and now I can deliver something to you. And so, like when you think about sharing content and getting it in front of someone else's, what kind of things do you use? What tools or tricks do you use for getting content in front of the right people?
Right. So this is huge, and it's only going to get bigger. So right now there's roughly 1.4 billion people that have access to, social networks, internet, what have you. But most of the industry analyst groups say that by 2019, 2020, next 6, 7, 8 years, we're going to go from like this 1.5 billion folks connected to about 6 billion. Let that sit on you for a second, because we're talking about like numbers that don't make sense to our brains because they're too big. Like we can hardly fathom the size of the social internet and the linked internet right now. When we get to where every single person in East Africa has something like a fourth generation iPhone or Samsung Galaxy S3 or something, holy cow. I mean, not only is everybody on this chat going to be competing with those folks, but all of that content in terms of getting your voice understood and heard in a world is going to be incredibly challenging. So it's not, some folks used to say content's key, right? So, let's get a blog post, let's do this, and we'll do a video. Well, okay, those are table stakes now, but the quality of the content has to be good, and also how you share it. So tips on sharing: you have to be visual. Your feed has to be visual, because if your text goes past me at the beat of a frenetic dog's heartbeat, like running, like if it's bam 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 bam, I didn't see it. But if I catch that picture, oh wait, what was that? Oh, there's a link. Then you click. And so being visual in your Facebook stream is going to be huge, because the algorithm already docks you if you aren't posting pictures. If it's on Twitter, people just simply don't see because it's just text. They got to see a picture. If it's LinkedIn, LinkedIn's getting better. Their mobile app will display your picture well. If you post a picture on LinkedIn to their computer screen, it posts a little odd. So that's something they're working at. And Google Plus, of course, everybody can bag on Google Plus, but Google, here's the thing about Google. Side note, Google doesn't lose. Okay? Like, let's just remember who Google is. So they may have screwed something up with Google Plus early on. They may have gotten better and then screwed it up again. Listen, Google doesn't lose. So it's not going away, and so they're highly visual network with Google Plus Hangouts we're doing now and with pictures. So yeah, it's got to be visual. You got to get visual.
I agree, and I think standing out from the noise. We had this discussion about how do you repost or reshare documents or links or posts that you have, and I am guilty. I love resharing stuff, but not resharing the exact same message. Sometimes I'll add a picture. Sometimes I'll add a hashtag. Sometimes I'll bring someone in the conversation. I think Vincent had put it in there.
Absolutely.
If you share a link, provide something beyond the title. I can't tell you how many times I used to joke a lot when I started. People are like, Brian, how do you get all of your links clicked on? And I would say buffer. I would say buffer chat changed my world because I could highlight something in an article and say buffer that, and it would buffer that instead of the title. And all of a sudden, the title was something that everyone saw, and it just comes white noise, white noise, white noise. And all of a sudden, I have a quote in there, and sometimes even adding a quote and saying, hey, do you agree with this? Like, I'll have people bring me into hashtag Twitter chat conversations because they just said, hey, Brian, this is what someone just said. Do you agree? If they would have said, Brian, you should join this chat, I would have been ignored. But they brought the value and added me on. I think that's kind of an important element. And you're right, visual. I can't tell you. I'm a Canvangelist. Canva is my. It should be my homepage because I believe that sharing content on social to stand out, you have to provide value, but you also have to the news feed goes so quick, you have to get their attention, and great graphics, great things, and they're so easy to create and add into your blogs now with Canva. I'm kind of a huge fan on that side. So on question 7, we say, how do you feel about auto responding on Twitter? And I'd even take auto responding a step further. How do you kind of feel with kind of auto responding, or even the ones I think Josh had said it. Everybody kind of got in this mode of you had to say thank you every time someone retweeted. I think thank God we're getting away from that, because I think now instead of thank you to everyone, when someone retweets you a lot, why don't you look and find what they've shared in their Twitter feed and reshare their stuff? Like
absolutely.
So
this goes to my basic core philosophy. It's be a blessing, not a curse. Is it a curse to thank every person or add a smiley face to their tweet? Now, if that's your brand, like Ted Rubin does this, he literally will make sure that you know that he saw your tweet by adding a smiley face to it or saying a TY for thank you. And that works for Ted. But when everybody does it, it gets lost in the noise. So he sort of owns that, actually. I would say that Ted actually owns that, and he won't be punished for it. There are very few others that can get away with it. What I would say is this. I want to jump on what you said about sharing other stuff. This is the hardest thing to get a brand to swallow, okay? Because they're like, why are we promoting other people's stuff? Why are we wasting this media outlet to promote other people's stuff? I have a couple answers to that question. One, every time you tweet somebody else's stuff, guess whose handle icon shows up in the Twitter feed? Yours. So at bare minimum, just from a purely numbers thing, when you tweet somebody else's stuff, your handle shows up in their feed, and it also scrolls by if it's interesting to an industry. The second thing I would say is, when you're sharing other people's stuff, you're actually showing them that you value them, and they are inclined then to reciprocate and value you. What I would suggest in a social selling context, since we're getting towards the end of this hour, is this. Here's a tip for social selling. Start to take your brands that you're working with. If you are, say, a social strategist at a single company, or you're a social strategist working with a number of brands, what you need to get is you need to get a list of clients that your company has, regardless of what legal says, because they don't want to give you any of that, regardless of what sales says, because sometimes they want to protect certain leads or what have you. But the thing is you get that list, and then you don't acknowledge your sales relationship, your financial relationship that's happening behind the scenes. But what you do is you acknowledge them publicly with what they're doing in their industry or with their nonprofit group, and you promote that stuff. And guess what happens? They then turn around and use all of their media attention to lift you up when you have a blog post, when you have a video out, or you have a big announcement about, say, an acquisition your company just did. you've earned their trust, and they're going to value you and promote you. And pretty soon you have a massive network of folks that all of a sudden they know that behind the scenes you have this business relationship, and nobody's getting in trouble because you aren't acknowledging it publicly. Sometimes that's an issue, but they can acknowledge you publicly because they aren't necessarily saying anything about that.
No, I couldn't agree more. And really, the idea of trust. I think if you said trust every minute of every, when it comes down to social, and social, social became really easy to me when I embraced transparency, because I no longer had to worry about what I was sharing or hiding the truth or what could be honest on social. I just share what who I am and what I'm doing on social, and by doing so, people can choose to follow me or choose to unfollow me. But it became not only an easy trusting relationship, but your authenticity is what every salesperson is focused on, right? And
Right.
you want to attract attention, and you want to have authentic opinions. And I love your conversation on the competition, because it is the hardest thing to get through people's heads. And I told someone, we were going through some strategy, and I said, is your competition, who you guys are neck and neck with for the same customers, do they do every single thing wrong? All 100% of what they do is wrong? Or do you guys agree with about 50% of it, and 50% you guys are going different directions? And
Right.
they look at you and they're like, well, yeah, about 50%. I was like, well, then why don't you start promoting when they share something that isn't that 50%? Because not only do they have a better chance of sharing your stuff, but now you're in the conversation because they're going to retweet, because a competitor, I'm a big believer that, giving on social, hitting retweet, a lot of times adding, sharing that little value of your competitors will in the long run attract your customers, which were following your competitors to begin with, and say, wow, these guys are that confident. They agree with them on this, but I wonder what they stand out from. Like, what's their difference? I think
Right, because you're always trying to figure out, well, wait a minute, so I want to buy this service, or I want to get this thing. And then you're sitting there on Google and dealing with Google's ridiculous algorithm now that doesn't show you what you need to see. They show you what they think you need to see. You can't find all the times what, like, say, a competitor's product or service is. You really have to dig down in the pages. So if you now are popping up in a social feed, are you Googling? No, you literally are starting to see things come out of the woodwork of Twitter and Facebook. And you can see who the competitors are, and you can make a decision. Another thing that I would say, Brian, and just since we're getting towards the end on that whole idea of sharing others' stuff, is if you find other folks that maybe aren't your competitors, but are people that augment your service, that are partners in terms of services with your service or product, if you build those relationships, these aren't end clients or customers, but people that you partner with in your industry, if you create a coalition, if you will, around that, I'm seeing that happen already. I see it in the Salesforce world. I see it in partner communities inside other big industries. And you basically, what you're doing, if you remember SEO, search engine optimization, people would build these giant networks, these webs of connected links and pages. I'll put my link on my page if you put my link on your page. Well, they're doing that in a social function. They're doing it organically. They're saying, hey, I'll write a blog post about you guys if you guys wouldn't mind writing a blog post next month about us. And hey, I don't mind promoting you guys if you'll promote us. And it sounds kind of wrong maybe up front to some folks. Say, well, that's not natural, that's not organic. But what it does do is it sort of says, hey, I trust you, you trust me. Let's work together out here to make sure that our footprint is bigger than any one individual. We're stronger together than we are alone.
Love that. That is the truth. And I use the analogy that when companies pay for a commercial, Ford pays for a commercial, they don't have different channels for Chevy commercials, right? They're on the same channel. So, I don't care what the aspect is when people are going down that path. I think that also comes back to, really what your whole story. Like, and I think, I appreciate you coming on and doing Social Selling Hour. And, part of Twitter chats is that, we're not sponsored. Rachel and I are someone that came together from, Rachel was an amazing community manager for her previous company, and drew me into the tool, got me using it, and create a relationship. We've not only share similar mentors and vision, but similar friends like yourself, and I think that's really where social. Tim McDonald says it's a one-to-one conversation on social that's important, because that one-to-one relationship then can create a ripple, which will then inspire a community, and that's really what the overall social is. So we got about 5 minutes left. I do appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everybody
Yeah.
kind of getting lots of good feedback on the Google Plus and Twitter combo. So I like that. We're going to have to do that more moving forward. But the last question we have here is we're going to go, what's the best Twitter advice you've ever received? And I'm a big fan of Google Plus. I have a whole rant
Mm-hmm.
on where I find value there. I've been using LinkedIn groups to huge value as of recently, but it takes a lot of work. But
Yes, it
when it
does.
comes down to Twitter, I think certain people really are great at Twitter. Certain people think they're great at Twitter. And like, what's the best advice you received on Twitter?
Oh my goodness, what is the best advice I've received on Twitter? Um, well, Vala Offshore, VALAAFSHAR, awesome follow on Twitter, and he had something that came out a while ago, gosh, about a year ago, and I put up a graphic, but it's just be social. The acronym is that you want to basically care about people and just make sure that you are supporting what they're doing and not stepping on their toes out here. It's just basically love people. That is so hard for a lot of people to say, because when they come to something like Twitter, they say, well, what can I get out of it?
Yes.
Immediately, well, it gives me nothing. But the thing with a relationship is, you in real life and is the same as social, you don't get anything out of a relationship unless you give to it. So if you never retweet people, if you never politely ask for permission to talk about something with them, if you aren't nice and you're just me, selfish, you aren't going to get anything out of it. So essentially, it's just love people.
I
I
love
mean,
that.
it's so
That's
mushy, but it's true.
it's true. No, and you know what? Vala is, I would say, my mentor as well on Twitter. And it's funny because I remember the day I finished his book, his Social Business Excellence book, and
Yeah.
I tweeted him and said, "Hey, I love this paragraph. Do you have any updated details?" And he replied back and kind of gave me details. And to me, it was, I can't play basketball with Michael Jordan. And if I went and saw Michael Jordan in the hallway, I would say, "Oh my God," or take a picture. But if I, like on social, if you take the time, show the love, and I mean, I reached out to him. He messaged me back. I remember going to my wife going, "You won't believe this. The author of a book just messaged me back and gave me a link to more info." And she was like, "Well, what did you do to do that?" I just said I liked this book and asked him a question. And it was because I cared. If someone takes the time to show the love, showing the love can be as easy as sharing someone else's content. I know some people that almost refuse to share their own content more than once on Twitter, but I
Hmm.
know they post 4 blogs a day or 4 blogs a week. So what I end up doing is I go to their Facebook page, which they do post their blogs, and I share it for them on Twitter more than once, because you're showing the love beyond just an easy retweet. And Zach, I think you do a great job of it, because with CXO Talk and Lead with Giants, like so many of these Twitter chats, not only is there a lot of noise, but there's a lot of great people and a lot of community, and sharing content that isn't just the same old, showing people the love that deserve the love, I think is a huge value add, and that's important. So I will, Rachel's rocking on the Twitter. I think next time we're gonna switch roles. We're gonna let Rachel do the hosting on the next G+1, and I'll do the Twitter side, because I will give Rachel the credit. She's the mastermind behind the questions and the advertising and bringing the guests on. So I've been riding her coattails for sure. So much appreciated to everybody on
Rachel is
Twitter.
awesome. Yep.
She is. She is. She is. I think I can't remember her title today. Is it chief listener, or chief community listener, or? But she is the embodies the idea of listening on social. And so make sure to follow us again. But I'll give you the last word, Zach, on before we kind of send it offline, on just kind of your overall thoughts on the chat, or kind of your advice, your last tips and advice for those that are following us as we send off.
Sure, sure. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm a huge fan of Social Selling Hour. When I saw you guys sort of deving this idea on Facebook and Google Plus and places, I guess my best advice is don't be afraid to engage. I think that so many people, I've met, VPs of marketing at large companies, right? They'll sort of whisper through a DM, "Hey, Zach, I'm afraid to say anything because of where I'm at professionally, and that person's the CEO, or that person's an admin. What will people think if I'm talking to an admin?" Or they get into this sort of high school, I think it's this weird high school, junior high thing. Oh my goodness. Look, if you've got value and you have something to offer, Why are you withholding that from anybody? So don't just lurk. Don't just, there's probably 100 people right now just lurking on this chat that never said anything. And the thing is when you withhold something of value to other people because of fear, you're actually not serving those people well. You're not loving those people. And so whereas you thought it was a pride thing by keeping it to yourself and not wanting to promote yourself or promote your thought, what you're actually doing is the exact opposite. You're actually, because of your pride, because you are fearful of being judged, you're not sharing, you're not loving, you're not giving. And so we need to change our thought to how we say it, of course, but we need to give, we need to engage. And when you do that, you're going to find a wonderful community out here in the social internet, and it's only going to get bigger. Again, we're going to go from 1 point whatever billion people to like 6 billion people on Earth. They're going to be connected here. So I say it's not going away, and just get out there and love people.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. Thank you guys for listening. We will see you next week, next Monday, same time, same channel. Thank you.